They didn't fire me. That would have been too direct, too messy. No, they honored me with the gift of remote work. Like a dusty plaque they didn't want to hang on the wall anymore. Lena, my manager cooed across the glass-walled conference room, voice dripping with faux sincerity. We think you've earned the privilege of working from home. It's time you enjoyed flexibility after 11 years of service. Translation: they wanted my seat, my cubicle with the window glimpse, my quiet authority in the network I built, and most of all, the loyalty of a team that still came to me with questions instead of bowing to the new golden boy they were parachuting in. So I smiled, tucked my laptop under my arm, and left without protest. They thought they'd erase me from the building. But what they forgot was this: I am the building. Every wire in the walls, every blinking server rack, every humming exit sign with its hidden logs, I'd mapped it. When they approved Lena's honorary remote role, they handed the ghost keys to the kingdom straight into my hands. The office itself had always been a theater of glass and pretense. Fresh paint, buzzing fluorescence overhead, cheerful posters about synergy taped slightly askew by interns. But behind it all, the guts I knew better than anyone. Aging routers hidden in the server room's chilly air, forgotten backup drives in the dusty storage closet, permissions tables no one had cleaned in years. I used to joke that I could bring the place to its knees with 3 clicks. Now it wasn't a joke. The day I went remote, they slid some poor new hire Greg something into my spot. He looked proud, straightening the photos of his family on my desk. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I logged in from my apartment that night, balancing my laptop on the kitchen table littered with takeout boxes. My cat, Nimbus, flicked his tail over a stack of printouts while I reconnected to the VPN with the admin credentials I still technically had. Nobody had revoked them. They never do. That was their first mistake. I didn't plan on burning it all down. No, that would be obvious, and obvious gets you caught. My revenge would be quieter, subtler. A series of glitches, inconveniences, and perfectly timed misfires. Ghost work. They'd never see me, but they'd feel me. So I began with something small. A calendar sync. The executive team had a big vision meeting scheduled at 9 a.m. sharp. I nudged one tiny entry, shifting it just enough that half of them thought it started at 9:30. Harmless, really. Except for the part where the CEO stood alone in the conference room, tapping his Mont Blanc pen so hard the cap cracked. From my kitchen, sipping day-old coffee, I watched the confusion ripple across the shared Outlook logs like a storm moving over the sea. No one suspected a thing. I leaned back, smiled at Nimbus, and whispered, "Welcome to the haunting." The first glitch was a whisper. The second one, that was my calling card. It started with a document, an innocuous quarterly report Greg was supposed to polish and present. Poor Greg. He saved it neatly into the shared folder, labeled it exactly how the director liked. Q2_revenue_final_final. Docs. Except when he opened it the next day, the file was gone. Vanished. He tore through subfolders, dug in archive drives, even emailed IT in a panic. No trace. And then, like an apparition, it reappeared, time-stamped exactly at the moment the director asked him to present. He clicked it open on the projector, pale as paper. But the version I'd slipped in wasn't his polished draft. It was the raw, half-finished one riddled with notes like, "Ask Lena how Tio fixed this formula." The director's face turned a dangerous shade of corporate maroon. Greg stammered, his voice cracking in the silence. I could almost hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, that familiar office tension, thick enough to choke on. And me? I sat in my apartment, Nimbus sprawled across the keyboard, eating cold pizza with the satisfaction of a magician pulling strings from afar. You have to understand, this wasn't random mischief. Every nudge was deliberate, precise. I'd mapped their weaknesses as carefully as I'd mapped the wiring of the building. The execs prided themselves on efficiency. But what they really worshipped was appearances. Timeliness, polish, the illusion of control. So I chipped away at exactly that. A letter sent to the wrong recipient. A budget draft forwarded to the junior analyst instead of the CFO. Calendar reminders nudged just far enough to make someone look sloppy. Never anything destructive, just enough to make them sweat, to make their glossy facade crack. And oh, how quickly cracks spread in glass. I watched them scramble, whisper, cover their tracks. IT shrugged helplessly. System glitch, they said. Happens sometimes. Nobody suspected the ghost behind the code. Every night I set up camp at my kitchen table. Laptop glowing, printouts fan like tarot cards, highlighter marks tracking the veins of their fragile system. Nimbus watched with solemn cat judgment as if he knew I was crafting something darker than spreadsheets. One sticky note at a time, the plan grew. But the sweetest part? I wasn't even breaking rules. My access was legitimate, my login still active, my knowledge unmatched. If they wanted me invisible, fine. I'd give them the haunting of a lifetime. And all the while, management celebrated their fresh new direction, thinking they'd successfully brushed Lena into the margins. I smiled at that thought, fingers flying over the keyboard. Because margins? Margins are where ghosts live. By the third week, the office had developed a new vocabulary. System hiccup. Every mishap was brushed off with those two little words, as if the company's entire nervous system had suddenly developed a case of indigestion. The beauty of it was that no one questioned it. Not really. Tech glitches were like ghosts in old buildings. You didn't see them, but you believed in them. Take the boardroom showdown. The executives were set to present projections to investors. Everything had to be seamless. The projector flickered to life, charts polished, spreadsheets locked tight. Except the numbers wouldn't align. Every time the CFO clicked to the next slide, the columns shifted by a decimal, margins skewed like carnival mirrors. He smacked the laptop, cursed under his breath. It was fine this morning. I knew it was. I tested it myself twice. From my apartment, coffee steaming beside my laptop, I pressed one key and watched the shared file replace itself with the slightly off version I'd preloaded days ago. The investors leaned in, frowning, asking questions the CFO couldn't answer. $1 billion company, and they couldn't keep a PowerPoint straight. That night, the internal Slack lit up with whispers. Is IT asleep? Is someone messing with permissions? Poor souls ran audits until dawn and came up empty. Of course they did. I'd left no fingerprints. Greg, my unwilling replacement, had started to look haunted himself. His shirt's wrinkled, eyes ringed in shadow. He muttered apologies in meetings, fumbled files, grew twitchy around the printer like it might explode on him. And management? They'd begun to sweat, though they tried to hide it under platitudes. Growing pains, they told the staff. Transition period. Funny. I'd been through 100 transition periods in that building, smoothing the chaos they never saw. But now, without me, every little inconvenience ballooned into a crisis. I worked in silence the way ghosts do. Nights stretched long, my kitchen table cluttered with USB drives, color-coded notes and half-drained mugs. Nimbus would paw at a stray paperclip, batting it under the fridge while I mapped out my next move. Because this wasn't just mischief. This was rehearsal. I was sharpening the knife with little cuts before the main strike. The deal was coming, the big deal. A merger whispered in halls, hidden behind NDAs and conference calls labeled strategy sessions. I knew their timelines better than they did because I'd seen the metadata, the email trails, the hurried drafts. And when the moment came when they needed every cog turning in sync, they'd learn what it really meant to exile the architect of their machine. For now, I let them stew in their glitch season. Every day another tiny haunting. They thought they'd rid themselves of me. But I was still there. In the walls. In the wires. Waiting. The first email misfire was almost poetic. The VP of Operations had drafted a long, smug memo about cultural alignment for the upcoming merger, full of buzzwords so inflated I thought my screen might float away. It was meant for the executive team only. Instead, by the time his coffee cooled, every junior analyst in the company had it in their inbox. Subject line. For leadership eyes only. Oh, the gossip that stirred. Breakroom chatter buzzed like static. Analysts screenshot their favorite lines. Synergistic recalibration of stakeholder buy-in was a crowd favorite and sent them spiraling through side channels. By lunch, the memo was a meme. The VP stormed through the halls, red-faced, barking about confidentiality. IT searched furiously for an explanation, muttering about misconfigured rules. Nobody suspected a ghost with intimate knowledge of their Outlook distribution lists. That was the beauty of it. I didn't have to fabricate scandals. I just tipped the scales so their own arrogance exposed itself. Every night I refined the game. My kitchen table looked like the war room of a general planning a siege. Sticky notes with login windows, arrows tracing approval chains, printouts of policy clauses highlighted in neon pink. Nimbus would sprawl across the papers as if to remind me, yes, you are queen of this kingdom of scraps. And during the day, I played the invisible role of remote worker, responding to emails with short, efficient replies. Always professional, always quiet. They forgot I was even there. That was their second mistake. Because when you forget the ghost, you don't notice the flickering lights. I slipped another misfire into play. An urgent compliance checklist that never reached legal on time. Instead, it sat quietly in a hidden folder until 2 hours after the deadline, then appeared like magic in the general queue. The compliance director nearly tore his tie off in frustration. Meanwhile, executives grew paranoid. They whispered about sabotage but softly, as if saying it aloud might summon it closer. Some suspected rival departments. Others blamed underpaid IT staff. Nobody said Lena. And I kept my smile sharp and my movements light. Because I knew what was coming. The merger loomed larger every day. Contracts drafted, NDAs signed, executives rehearsing their charm for the press. And me, the ghost they buried too soon. Writing my own script in the shadows. The first time an executive showed up 30 minutes late to his own meeting, people chuckled. The second time they frowned. By the third, whispers began, is he losing it? I'd orchestrated it with a surgeon's precision. One adjustment here, one shifted invite there. Outlook is a funny beast. People trust it blindly, clicking accept without checking details. And all it takes is one ghost in the wires to swap a 10 o'clock with a 10:30. Or invite half the room to one time slot and the other half to another. The CEO hated waiting. He paced the glass conference room like a lion in a too small cage. Mont-Blanc pen clicking like a metronome of rage. His executives arrived in scattered clumps, sweaty and flustered, trying to mask their confusion. Calendar misfire, they mumbled. Funny how that phrase kept showing up. From my apartment I could see it all unfold in the metadata. I knew exactly when someone noticed the mismatch, exactly when they scrambled to forward the invite to the right time. Like chess pieces scurrying on a board I'd already tilted. Nimbus curled in his usual post on the printer, tail flicking against stacks of printouts while I traced the timelines with a highlighter. Each misaligned hour was another crack in their veneer of control. But my favorite play was the board retreat. An entire offsite event, rented hotel ballroom, catered lunch, delayed because half the executives showed up on Friday, and the other half thought it was scheduled for Monday. The hotel staff looked bewildered. The caterer fumed, charging them double for the wasted spread. And the board members? They sat in their polished suits, staring at empty chairs and wondering who was to blame. Meanwhile, I sat cross-legged on my couch, sipping cheap wine from a coffee mug, watching the digital chaos ripple like a storm on a pond. Every misfire, every delay, every vanished hour, none of it pointed back to me. To them, I didn't exist anymore. Just another forgotten remote worker, quietly fading into the background. But I was the hum in the fluorescence, the flicker in the exit sign, the cold air in the server room that no one could explain. And they were only just starting to feel me. The merger prep was supposed to be airtight. Every binder tabbed, every draft marked confidential in bold Arial. Every approval tracked in neat audit trails. They loved their illusion of order. So I targeted the smallest hinge in their entire machine document control. It started with one contract draft that vanished. The legal team swore they'd uploaded it to the shared drive. The project manager swore she'd seen it yesterday. But now? Gone. Panic rippled. Emails flew. Voices rose. And just when the replacement draft was nearly finished, the original reappeared. Buried in an obscure subfolder no one claimed to have touched. Timing, of course, was everything. It popped back into existence right as the VP was presenting to external counsel. Pages unreviewed, clauses unpolished, footnotes screaming for attention. The VP fumbled, flipping through paper that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. By the time the dust settled, half the room doubted the other half. Trust frayed at the edges. And me? I sat at my kitchen table, noodle cup in hand, watching Slack messages scroll across my second monitor like frantic Morse code. Nimbus licked at the steam unimpressed. But I didn't stop at one. Every week a new phantom draft surfaced. Budget sheets with old numbers. Policy proposals missing signatures. Compliance reports stamped obsolete suddenly blinking back into the system. I knew the system too well. I knew which shared folders had sloppy permissions, which backups overwrote too slowly, which approval chains left breadcrumbs nobody followed. And because I'd built the thing, I knew how to make it look like the machine itself was spitting out ghosts. The merger team grew brittle. Meetings turned into finger-pointing matches. Legal snarled at finance. Finance snapped at operations. Operations whispered about IT. All the while, management preached resilience. They smiled wide for press teasers about the bright new chapter, their voices echoing in glossy videos with stock music and staged handshakes. But inside, they were cracking. And I hadn't even touched the final blow yet. Every ghost needs a crescendo. Mine was coming. The closer the merger drew, the sharper my little hauntings became. No more playful nudges. These were strikes at the joints, the hinges that held their glittering machine together. The executives were preparing their grand finale. A massive all-hands meeting to announce the transformational future. Polished slides, carefully scripted talking points, staged applause. They rehearsed it like actors. And I rewrote the script. One night, with the city humming faintly outside my window, I slid into the event's shared folder. The CEO's speech file glowed there, smug and untouched. With a few keystrokes I duplicated it, one version left pristine, the other subtly altered. Words swapped, bullet points shifted, numbers just skewed enough to sound wrong. Both versions sat there, identical file names, only metadata distinguishing them. By the time the AV team loaded it onto the projector, it was the wrong one. The CEO stood at the podium, lights blazing, and delivered lines that made no sense. Numbers didn't match investor reports. Promises contradicted prior memos. Analysts frowned. Staff exchanged side eyes. He glanced down at his notes mid-sentence, realizing the betrayal, but it was too late. The words were already in the air. Already screenshotted and whispered about. Back in my apartment, I watched the chaos unfold in livestream snippets leaked by employees who couldn't resist sharing. The chat channels boiled. Was this deliberate? A cover-up? Did he forget the numbers? Every guest chipped away at the illusion of control. I leaned back, stretching, exhaustion hanging from my shoulders like a heavy coat. Nimbus yawned from his post on the windowsill, unimpressed with human drama. But me? I was thrilled. Because this wasn't just sabotage for the sake of it. This was a mirror held up to the management that thought they could erase me, replace me, pretend I hadn't been the scaffolding under their empire. And soon, when the deal itself was on the table, I would place my final card. The one that revealed their quiet machinations in full daylight. Everything was going exactly to plan. Or so I thought. Because what I hadn't accounted for was that sometimes even ghosts can be seen. It was supposed to be flawless. Every step so far had landed with surgical precision, each glitch cutting exactly where I wanted. But ghosts, it turns out, aren't invisible forever. The first warning came from an unexpected place. IT. A junior admin. I remembered her faintly, shy girl named Marissa who used to linger by my cubicle asking questions about permissions, sent an internal note about anomalous activity. She'd traced odd patterns in the access logs. Nothing incriminating yet, but close. The words chilled me more than I'd admit. Repeated logins from an inactive user account. Inactive. That was me. They hadn't formally offboarded my profile, but they'd marked it legacy. And now, someone sharp enough was connecting dots. I sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m. Half-empty mug beside me, rereading the note on my second monitor. Nimbus slept curled against a stack of binders, blissfully unaware. For the first time, my heart beat too fast. The second warning came faster. During another calendar shuffle, routine, easy second nature, I slipped. One executive noticed the invite came from L. Torres. Not the usual automated system. Just one little line in fine print at the bottom. He flagged it to IT. And suddenly, the whisper in the office wasn't system glitch. It was sabotage. Panic is fun when you control it. Panic is terrifying when it turns toward you. By the end of the week, IT had pulled a small task force. Batch logs, VPN timestamps, forensic trails. I knew those systems inside out, but paranoia makes people thorough. If they followed the right breadcrumb far enough, eventually they'd find me. And I couldn't let them. Not yet. Not before the final strike. I stared at my sticky note war map, suddenly less like a general and more like a cornered thief. The lines I'd drawn so confidently now looked like ropes tightening around my own throat. The merger loomed only days away. The truth I planned to slip to the right hands, the real proof of management's games, sat waiting on my encrypted drive. But now? Now the ghost was being hunted. The first time I saw my own username on an internal investigation report, I nearly dropped my coffee. They'd found me. Or at least they thought they had. Legacy account activity traced to external IPs. The document read. Unusual file access patterns. Possible breach. Breach. That word turned my stomach. It wasn't sabotage anymore. It wasn't mischief. They were preparing to call me a criminal. I paced my apartment, mug clutched too tightly in my hands. Nimbus followed me with narrowed eyes, tail flicking. He knew something was wrong. For the first time I doubted myself. Not the plan, I knew it was right. Management had buried skeletons in those contracts, and the world deserved to see them. But doubt in whether I'd even make it that far before the walls closed in. Then the real blow landed. Friday afternoon I tried to log in routine muscle memory, and the system rejected me. Access denied. The words burned across the screen. My lifeline severed. They'd shut me out. For a long panicked minute I sat frozen. All my careful hauntings, all my quiet control. Gone in one keystroke from an IT admin who didn't even know what they just destroyed. I tore through backups, alternate routes, forgotten test portals. Most were gone. The net was tightening. But then, tucked in a forgotten corner, I found one crack. An old maintenance script still tied to my credentials, buried so deep no junior admin would think to look. It was fragile, glitchy, half-broken. But it was something. I had one last thread to pull. The problem? I couldn't run the final strike from the shadows anymore. If I pushed the truth out using this unstable crack, they'd see it. They'd know it was me. And once my name was attached, there'd be no hiding behind system glitch. No plausible deniability. Just Lina Torres, exiled employee, suddenly reappearing with a digital dagger. For the first time since this started, I felt like a ghost cornered in daylight. And daylight was brutal. They thought they'd locked me out. They thought the ghost was gone. But I'd built the walls of that digital house, and I knew where the cracks lived. That broken maintenance script, half forgotten, buried deep in a dusty corner of the system, wasn't just a relic. It was my back door. I'd written it years ago to automate server patches, and nobody had ever bothered to decommission it. Now it was my lifeline. The problem was, the thing was fragile. Like balancing on rotten floorboards, you could take a step, maybe two, before it all collapsed under you. I tested it cautiously from my kitchen, fingers hovering over the keys, breath caught in my chest. The script coughed, sputtered, then connected. A trickle of access flowed back in. Not everything, not the control I'd once had, but enough. Enough to see. Enough to move. And enough to plan my last strike. I had the files. The real ones. Hidden drafts of merger contracts, emails with timelines that didn't match the story management was spinning, budget notes that revealed they were gutting whole departments under the guise of synergy. It wasn't just arrogance. It was fraud dressed in PowerPoints. And I wasn't going to let it slide. The question was how to deliver it. If I pushed too hard through the maintenance script, alarms would trip. They'd see Lina Torres lighting up the system like a flare. But if I stayed too quiet, the deal would close, the lies would harden into truth, and I'd be just another ghost story whispered in the break room. So I made my choice. I would burn the last of my invisibility. I would put my name to the truth. Not as a glitch. Not as a haunting. But as the architect returning to claim her work. Nimbus meowed sharply, as if to punctuate the thought, tail curling around my monitor. I smiled despite the weight pressing on me. "All right, little one," I whispered. "Let's bring down the curtain." I didn't sneak in this time. I walked straight through the front door. Through that brittle maintenance script, I pushed the truth into daylight. Not hidden, not whispered, not a ghost shadow, but stamped, dated, undeniable. The files went first. Contracts showing layoffs disguised as synergy. Budget cuts hidden behind merger gloss. Emails where executives congratulated themselves on selling the story. All routed, not to employees, not to IT. No, I sent them directly to the auditors and regulators tied to the deal. Then the investors. Then, just for good measure, the entire staff distribution list. My name was on every packet. No glitch to blame, no phantom account. Just Lina Torres, the woman they'd shoved aside. The honorary remote worker they thought would fade quietly into nothing. The fallout was instant. The press hit before lunch. Headlines with words like concealment, bad faith, regulatory inquiry. Phones rang non-stop. The merger press conference was canceled in a single panicked email. Inside the building, chaos reigned. Executives shouting behind glass walls, security swiping badges at odd hours, IT sprinting between server rooms. And the staff, the ones who remembered me, who'd once come to my cubicle for answers, they knew. The Slack threads told me so. Lina did this. Lina saved us. For once, my name wasn't erased. It was lit up. I sat in my apartment, chest tight, watching the storm spread. My laptop glowed with incoming notifications. Journalists requesting comment. Colleagues sending cautious thank yous. Lawyers drafting inquiries. Nimbus batted at the corner of the screen, unimpressed with human drama as usual. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. It was done. Not perfect, not clean, but done. They wanted me invisible. Instead, I became unforgettable. The merger collapsed within a week. Regulators froze the deal, auditors swarmed the offices, and executives who once strutted across glass walkways now scurried like rats in a flood. HR tried to spin it. We discovered inconsistencies. But staff knew better. They'd seen the emails. They'd read the contracts. They'd watched as Lina Torres, the woman they dismissed with a pat on the head and a fake smile, turned the system against its own masters. And me? I didn't return to the office. I didn't need to. My desk, my cubicle, my quiet window view. They were symbols of a place I'd already outgrown. The real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in finally stepping out of the shadows on my own terms. I spent the next days in silence, letting the city hum outside my apartment window, laptop closed for once. Nimbus sprawled across my kitchen table as if claiming the war room I no longer needed. I thought about the building. Its humming fluorescence, its drafty server rooms, its glass walls hiding whispers. They thought I was gone. But in a way I was still there, in every corner of the system I'd built. My fingerprints woven into the walls. My code humming in the wires. A ghost, yes, but no longer silent. The best revenge was never the glitches or the chaos. It was this, reminding them that the person they underestimated, the one they tried to erase, was the one holding the architecture of their empire in her hands the whole time. Being forgotten was my camouflage. Being underestimated was my weapon. And when the moment came, all I had to do was step forward. They'll remember me now. Not as a glitch. Not as a legacy account. But as the ghost who refused to fade. And that's the end of this haunting, friend. Because every story lives as long as it is remembered. A like is your mark on this story, and a subscription is your ticket to the next one. But tell me, if you were in my place, would you have stayed a ghost in the shadows, or stepped into the light like I did?